What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. I want to talk about this incident that happened in the visiting room in Salinas Valley like a month ago. And I know a lot of folks did videos about it at the time. There was great content. I'm not being critical. I think there's some details and information that was left out or unknown at that time. So I'll fill in some of those blanks and kind of give you the play-by-play. But I also want to tie in the why. Why would this have happened, right? Or what are some ideas? And I know there's videos made about that too. Mine are, a little bit different. And then also some legal work, right? We're going to get into this document, which I think is fascinating. And I think you guys will get a lot out of it. Also, the legal work, the propaganda, the back and forth, and then what comes next. Because you guys will remember that after this incident happened, CDCR, there was other violent incidents in CDCR. A couple people got knocked down at different places, but not related to this visiting room incident, but just CDCR violence, right? And they placed all level 4 prisons on lockdown for, I think it was supposed to be 21 days. About 21 days ago, about 30 days ago. So we'll see what happens next, right? We'll see where this goes. But first, a quick recap. What happened in Salinas Valley? To understand this, you have to understand Svsp facility in Salinas Valley, which is a level 4 180 design prison yard, general population yard. It is not integrated. It is not mixed. It is not 50-50. It is none of that. CDCR has made an attempt to integrate the yard. They have put people both on C upper and on C lower who used to be S and Y or otherwise just, had goofy stuff on their jacket, and they all got beat up or blasted or lost their life, right? A little bit of all the above. And that happened on C upper, and it has also happened on C lower. It is all general population, right? At the time that this happened, right? I haven't talked to anybody there today, but at the time that this happened, that's absolutely the way that yard works. But the difference is it's split in half. There's C upper and C lower, right? And it's just the number of the buildings. C lower is buildings 1 through 4. C upper is buildings 5 through 8. C lower houses northerners and southerners and paisas and blacks and whites and others. And in terms of those who fall up under prison politics, it houses the, folks in leadership of those bigger organizations. Okay. The other side, C upper, houses bulldogs and new flowers and blacks. I don't think, maybe there's others, I'm not sure, but they do not house whites or southerners or northerners or paisas, right? Or people from those organizations. So that is a difference. Okay. And they don't interact. They don't go to work together. They don't go to yard together. They don't go to school together. They don't do anything together except go in the visiting room. Now, the journey to the visiting room, anything can happen. Inside, where you go for restroom breaks and to strip out, during visit and that kind of stuff, anything can happen. Medical escort, slip cuffs, whatever, doors left open, anything can happen, and it has. Right, violence happens, and every group has won some and lost some in that conflict between them. Okay, you're talking about, for the most part, just a bunch of convicts, right? And everybody's with the business, and it's a level 4 yard. And so that stuff happens. But in the visiting room, it's hands off. And it's been that way for years. There have been incidents in the past, but they are very rare. And again, Svsp facility in Salinas Valley has been like this for a long time. The general population mainline bulldogs have been at Salinas Valley to some extent for the last like 20, years, 20 plus years. So this is nothing new. The administration knows what to do. Visiting room staff knows what to do. Everybody knows what to do. The convicts know what to do, right? And what not to do. What you don't do is get off in the visiting. And I know other folks, when they did their videos, explained all the different reasons why this is just unacceptable from, again, like a convict perspective, right? No pun intended. But why you just don't do this? Why people are getting money, you're taking a break from prison violence, on and on and on. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. I want to kind of move on. But I agree with all of that, right? Obviously. And like I have some strong opinions about about how this gets resolved. That I'll get to in a minute. But on Friday of this weekend, there's visiting, and C upper. So I'll just call it the Bulldog side of the yard, right? It's Bulldogs and New Flowers and the brothers, but to make it easy for you guys, I'll just call it the Bulldog side of the yard. So the Bulldog side of the yard, their visiting time ends just a little bit before the other side of the yard. And they have a lot less people from that side of the yard going to visiting. So to try to minimize the interactions outside the visiting room, right? And the stripping out and everything else, you want to try to keep these groups separate because they're going to get into it. So their visiting ends a little bit early, and that's relevant because there's a New Flower who is in the visiting room. He says goodbye to his loved ones. He turns around. The guys from the other side of the yard, right, are still sitting down with their families. You know, they got about 30 minutes left. 4 or 5 of them, I don't remember the exact number, but it was 4 or 5 Southsiders rushed this dude, right? He turns around after giving his lady a kiss, and they get on him. Okay, they walk away from their families, they walk away from their visitors, and they go get on this dude. They don't beat him up. If anything, they get touched up because they're, I don't know, maybe they just don't know how to jump people, but he winds up being able to split them, and so he's kind of tagging and doing his thing, and it all gets shut down very quickly, right? SEALs come, pepper spray, everything. Bye. Families get rushed outside. Everybody's exposed to pepper spray. It's a traumatic experience, to say the least. And then everybody gets taken back to their cells, right? They don't go to ADSEC. They just go back to their cells in their housing units, and that's that, right? Visits are canceled on Saturday. Understandably, a huge segment of the prison is pissed off because everybody's in the visiting room, right? Everybody has one of their homeboys in the visiting room. And so everybody's pissed, right? Saturday, there's no visits. There's no big kumbaya peace talk. There's none of that. There's just no visits. And folks are trying to figure out what the next steps are. But prison is a place of retaliation, and violence is the primary way to communicate in prison. And I'll share some more about that in a second. But when visits start on Sunday, right, and on Friday there's families, there's kids, there's everybody, right? Visits happen on Sunday, fairly early, not like the first couple people that walk in the door, but earlier in the day than this, than the one that happened on Friday. Some Bulldogs, some New Flowers, see a Southsider, right? He's in the visiting room by himself. He's with his family, but none of his homeboys are in there. And he had come to find out later. I don't think any of the guys involved knew this at the time, but come to find out later, and it's a fact. He is one of the Southsiders who jumped on the New Flower in the visiting on Friday. Right? So he's back in the visiting on Sunday with his lady and his kid. That's the only kid in the visiting room. Everybody else's family got the memo. And don't bring kids, because who knows what's going to happen in here, right? So all the Woods, all the brothers, everybody else somehow makes it to where there's no children in the visiting room except this one Southsider who, better than anybody else on the yard or in the room, should know what might happen because of what he participated in on Friday. You walked away from that lady and that kid to go get off on this convict, right? Now you bring the lady and the kid back in the visiting room on Sunday and feel like that's a smart move? Like, maybe you thought you could just wait till the end of the day and walk away from it. Like, no, that ain't. No. So he gets pressed, right? He gets pressed by some Bulldogs, some New Flowers, and he gets told, hey, step over here. Tell your lady to take the kid. Now I ask you, what would you do in that situation? Right? What would you do if you are that guy, that Southsider in the visiting room? And you know what happened on Friday. You're intimately familiar with it because you participated in it. But even if you didn't participate, even if you weren't one of those ones. You still know what happened. Everybody knows what happened. It's all over social media. It's TikTok. The wives know, Facebook posts. It's everywhere, let alone the people on the yard. Prison is filled with gossip. Everybody knows what happened. But like I said, you participated in it. But even if you didn't, and these dudes come up to you and are visiting, and like, hey, fool, step over here. You know what time it is. What's your next move? I will tell you what this guy did, which I think is some punk shit, to be very, very clear. He wants to talk. What? What you mean? Oh, no, man. Oh, but what? I mean, but wait. Fuck all that talking. Now you want to talk? Now you want to have a conversation? Even if you don't understand what's going on and you don't understand why, you are in prison. And you're being told, step away from your wife and kid and come over here. You got something coming. I'm stepping over there and getting what I got coming. And I'm going to try to give it too. Don't get me wrong. But I'll get the explanation later. Right now, there's a threat to my immediate area, and I need my lady and my kid to get away. Hey, babe, take the baby over there. I'll be right back. Hey, whatever happens, don't trip. I don't. Whatever you told her when you decided to go jump that dude on Friday, you didn't tell her on Sunday. And again, the only kid in the whole visiting room, I think it was a coward move. I do. I think maybe he thought that would protect him, or I don't know. I don't know what he was thinking. And I understand that what he did on Friday was not his bright idea. You know, it's a level 4 mainline, bro. You ain't no Southsider or Northerner or Wood for that matter, or going to just make an independent decision to go to the visiting room and do something like that, let alone 4 of you, right? So we know where this comes from. It's common sense. Everybody knows, at least the group, right? If not the individual. So I get that you didn't have a choice on Friday, and you don't have a choice what's going to happen to you on Sunday either. But what you can do is get them out the way, and he doesn't. So he gets smashed. He gets the shit beat out of him. That lasts a little bit longer than the incident on Friday. And my guess from being around CDCR, even though it was a very long time ago, thank God, COs probably let that one slide a little bit, right? They're known to do that. Like, oh, this is get backs. Okay, we'll get you money, right? And I would not be surprised if that was the mindset of them. But so he catches the business. And yes, his lady goes to get involved. She's all in the mix. She gets shoved out of the way. She doesn't get punched. She doesn't get hit. But she gets shoved out of the way. The kid doesn't get touched, right? And there's pepper spray, and the SEALs respond, and it's a whole ruckus, and everybody got to get put out to the grass. And the same shit that happened Friday happens again. Okay. Again, in my mind, that was a coward move on his part. Because as a man, you handle your own scandal, bro. You don't. Maybe he had no choice but to have the kid there. Personally, I would have canceled visits, right? Hey, if you can't come here without the kid, then you going to want to come on a different week. But either, I just think it's ridiculous. And it's even more ridiculous because he was involved on Friday. Like, some nerve, man. Some nerve. So anyways, that old coward ass dude loses it, right? And everybody goes back to their cells. Everybody gets sent back to their cells on the yard. Same shit as Friday, right? And then within, a short time after that, other stuff happens other places. Salinas Valley gets locked down, right? C facility gets locked down. They're going to search the yard. Now they're pissed, right? Then YouTube videos start getting made about it. I had heard about it, of course, when it had happened. But I was visiting my kids. That's before I moved to California. But that was the weekend I decided I was going to move to California. And so I just took the month of March off from content, apparently. But I'm back now. So there's that. And then there's talk and there's speculation. Why would this have happened? Right? What's going on here? And it's because these groups don't want to program together. Okay. For one, I think some of the narrative, it's propaganda. Right? And there's propaganda on both sides. Don't get me wrong. But there's a convenient mixing of very different populations of people to kind of paint a certain picture, right? We don't want to go to the visiting with these EOPs and these JCATs and these SNYs and these PCs and these dropouts and these bulldogs and these degenerates. Okay, that's not all one fucking group, bro. Those people don't program together. Like these aren't EOPs, these aren't JCATs, these aren't SNY, these aren't PCs. I understand you don't, both sides don't really like each other's politics, and I get that. When I was in prison, I got off with New Flowers because they had a yard, and I wasn't gonna stay on that yard because I wasn't that kind of guy. And I never programmed on a yard with bulldogs, and wouldn't have. So I get that from my time being in there many, many, many years ago, right? At this point, I don't care. I'm not in there, so I don't have to deal with that stuff, right? And I choose to kind of associate with people on an individual basis, not who they run with, because I don't have to care about that kind of stuff. I have the privilege of not being in prison. But I understand being in prison and not respecting somebody else's get down. But that doesn't mean that they're S and Y or PCs or whatever else, right? Like, it's the blurring of these lines. And I think it's done intentionally for propaganda purposes. These guys are all the same. No, because when they put people that had an SNY chrono on the Bulldog side of the yard, they got handled just the same as when they put them on the south side of the yard. So it's not the same, right? But that's one point. I want to get into this document because I think it sheds light on what this is really all about. Okay. So, and I'll link to this in the description. You could look it up and read it yourself. It's from the UCL Law Review. Challenging gladiator fights in the CDCR, and it's by a guy named Kevin McCarthy. Okay. Now, Kevin McCarthy is in law school. I think he's going to Columbia or something. He's in law school. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I'm going to highlight some parts of it. And he used to be in California Department of Corrections, right? He was validated as an MA associate, I believe, and got it in doing legal work and stuff in the SU program, just like a lot of us, to be honest. And then he got kicked out of the SU just like everybody else when they emptied him out. And he did some interesting legal work. And I want to say this up front. I don't know this dude. I don't know anybody that's done time with him. I've asked a couple folks and nobody recognizes him. At the same time, I think we crossed paths when I was at UC Berkeley. He was just getting out and coming around. We never really had a conversation, though. I don't have anything personal against the dude. I don't know him. His writing is amazing, and I respect his journey in terms of the legal work. And when I read this document through the lens of a civilian, it makes a lot of sense, right? And I think a lot of you guys would agree. Through the eyes of a convict, it's PC move. There's no other way to put it, right? In terms of how prison used to be. So I'm not saying this is a PC dude. I do not believe he is. He was in the SU program, validated with the fellas. He got kicked out and paroled from, a good yard. Like I'm not casting aspersions on Kevin McCarthy as an individual. And I respect his journey out here, and I hope that he has a lot of success. It's just crazy. Like, when you look at stuff that goes on in prison, I think we need to remember it's a different set of rules, and it's a different world, and it's different values, and you really can't compare. What makes sense in prison doesn't necessarily make sense out here, and what makes sense out here doesn't necessarily make sense in prison. This is a blending of the two, though, right? Because we're talking about prison. We're talking about prison yards and integration and groups in prison. So let's look at it through the lens of being in prison versus like a civilian in the streets and what makes sense out here, So anyways, get into it real quick. Like I said, I'm only going to read a few parts and I'll link to it. You guys can check it out yourself. The CDCR has a long history of placing people in long-term isolation in response to suspected or confirmed gang membership or affiliation. Despite being forced to stop the practice of indefinite solitary confinement, CDCR continued other arguably unconstitutional practices in response to gang activity. At Pleasant Valley State Prison, the prison officials first implemented gladiator fights. In response, the author and others organized mass filings of appeals, an outside protest, and a letter writing campaign before filing a lawsuit. There has not yet been a final decision on the lawsuit, but it is clearly morally wrong for CDCR to violate people's rights by subjecting them to assault and deny them rehabilitation opportunities. I 100% agree in that last sentence. 100% agree. So he talks about being in the SHU when he was validated in 2006. And then he got kicked out of the SHU through a series, and that's where he got into legal work, like I said, through a series of hunger strikes, activism, and a class action lawsuit. We succeeded in forcing CDCR to change their gang classification policy and end the practice of indefinite solitary confinement. The victory became official in 2015 through a settlement agreement. In addition to the hunger strikes, we were supported by our allies who were engaged in grassroots advocacy. Okay. And he's saying that the advocacy and the legislative hearings had an impact on the court decisions in terms of the actual Asker case. And I think he's right. Eighth Amendment violations at Pleasant Valley State Prison. The Eighth Amendment bars cruel and unusual punishment, okay, in the U.S. Constitution. I scored some individual legal victories through habeas corpus petitions and administrative appeals, which helped me and others. My greatest and proudest legal accomplishment would come once I was at Pleasant Valley State Prison. While I was housed at Pleasant Valley, I filed a habeas corpus petition to request an injunction against CDCR's decision to conduct what we termed gladiator fights among warring gang rivals and reinstate a bifurcated program that kept rivals separated while allowing them equal access to prison programs such as rehabilitative programs, family visits, and access to the recreation yard. Okay? Bifurcated, for those that don't know, is when one is split in two, basically, right? You could see facility in Salinas Valley is a bifurcated program, right? It's a yard that is split in two. Everybody has equal access to everything, but rivals or oppositions, if you will, are kept separate. The events that led to these gladiator fights occurred in the latter part of 2018, when a prison gang war began between two factions, the Fresno Bulldogs gang and a group composed of Hispanics from Southern California, whites, and Mexican nationals. The first riot occurred on September 28th at California State Prison Corcoran. That fall, many riots, meaning large-scale incidents of violence often involving weapons, between the Fresno Bulldogs and their rivals occurred at Avenal, Soledad, Corcoran, and Pleasant Valley. Instead of keeping the groups apart, CDCR dangerously continued to integrate them. We've all heard about that, right? Surprisingly, nobody was killed, but many of the men suffered serious and permanent bodily injuries. During the period between the riots, CDCR placed the men on lockdown, which results in the suspension of privileges such as rehab programs, visitation, phone access, and yard. So here we go. On January 5th, 2019, Pleasant Valley officials implemented a bifurcated program. Under the bifurcated program, again, one is split in two, the Bulldogs and their rivals alternated lockdown days. One day, the Bulldogs would be on lockdown while the other groups were off lockdown. The following day, the groups would switch. A few weeks later, on February 12th, CDCR ordered Pleasant Valley officials to end the bifurcated program and conduct 2 gladiator fights within 1 week. While we refer to these events as gladiator fights, CDCR used much more misleading terms such as peace talks, methods used to end the violence, and integration incrementals. Prison administrators conducted these fights by clearing out the exercise yard and then releasing a few members of opposing factions into the yard without restraints and allowing them to fight. Guards would stand by and watch until the fighting began, then would use pepper spray and shoot projectiles until the fighting ended. A gladiator fight was conducted on Valentine's Day 2019 between 2 Southern Hispanics and 2 Fresno Bulldogs. Prison was placed on lockdown. It would have been basically saying CDCR should have kept the split program. They should not have tried to integrate these guys. On February 21st, I filed a petition for writ of habeas corpus in Fresno County Superior Court. I alleged that the continued integration of the opposing factions failed to protect individuals of those groups from assault in violation of our Eighth Amendment rights. Talks about how, they have a responsibility not to hurt people. In addition to my habeas petition, my cellmate and I organized over 600 Southern Hispanics to simultaneously file administrative appeals on multiple occasions. Prison administrators are unaccustomed to this practice. It places a tremendous strain on the prison's resources, and it is extremely time-consuming for prison personnel to process and respond to that quantity of appeals. We filed them on issues related to the gladiator fights. For example, because of an unresolved war between the Northern Hispanics and Fresno Bulldogs, CDCR keeps both groups separated. So we appealed CDCR's refusal to keep the Bulldogs separated from the Southern Hispanics, whites, and Mexican nationals while keeping them separated from the Northern Hispanics. Each time we organized the mass filing of appeals, the guards would tear apart our cell. Of course, right? It's going to be retaliation. So because they learned about public perception, his cellmate's wife organized a protest in front of the prison for March 16, 2019. And on Monday, their house was hit again. They organized letter writing campaigns. We passed around a letter I had written to Governor Gavin Newsom and members of the Assembly and the Senate's Public Safety Committees for other Southern Hispanics and Mexican nationals to use as a template for their own letters. We also encouraged other Southern Hispanics and Mexican nationals to have their families ask their local assembly members or senators to intervene. We contacted newspapers, legal advocacy groups, and the Office of the Inspector General. Rather than participate in the gladiator fights and perpetuate the violence, all Southern Hispanics and Mexican nationals refused CDCR's attempt to conduct the gladiator fight on April 30th, 2019. Now, it's interesting because some of you guys probably saw videos about how these Bulldogs refuse to get off the bus and how the Bulldogs won't integrate. I mean, I'm not saying that those things didn't happen, but this also happened, right? And so, again, I think it's propaganda. I do know that there was an instance with the whites in Salinas Valley where they were wanting to basically go put some woods on the Bulldog yard in Salinas Valley on C Upper. And there are some whites, very affiliated whites, who agreed and was like, yeah, cool, we'll go move over there. We could program with anybody. And then the administration came back and was like, no, the Bulldogs said that it'd be violence if you guys come over there. The Bulldogs don't have an organized program. I don't know who was talking to who or anything else. I'm not surprised by any of it, right? Again, from a common sense civilian standpoint, man, nobody wants to be put in these situations. But when the narrative is we're superior to those guys, right? Or the narrative is those fools are scared, but we're not scared. I'm not saying that the Southsiders are scared. I don't think it's fear. I think it's just going to fuck up the program, right? And why you keep trying to mess with the program? People catch cases and everything else. So, again, I'm just putting this out there because I feel like there's been a slanted narrative. And I'm not defending anybody. I'm just saying that this right here, this is why you got a visiting room incident. Okay. We were told the whites, however, made peace with the Fresno Bulldogs, and CDCR and Pleasant Valley officials responded by removing the Bulldogs and whites from lockdown while keeping us on lockdown. We were told that if we wanted to be off lockdown and regain access to rehab programs, we had to go through integration incrementals with the Bulldogs. Although we refused to participate in the gladiator fights, there were still physical assaults and stabbings between the two. These incidents would occur when the guards would open the cells of affiliates of one group while the other was outside of their cells. We continue to file appeals regarding this. Fresno Superior Court issued an order to show cause. Court directed CDCR to address whether prison officials at Pleasant Valley were organizing fights among rival gang members and what measures had been taken in response to the gang violence, right? So here comes the Deputy Attorney General of Pleasant Valley. They're still doing their letter writing. They're still doing their public awareness. And then eventually, July 10th, 2019, a guard plants a weapon inside of this guy, Kevin McCarthy's cell. He gets snatched up, taken to ADSEC. He's on the verge of coming home. He's already been accepted to UC Berkeley, right? He's got less than a year on his sentence. Getting a DA referral for a weapon, it's going to mess all that up. They tell him, hey, man, your life is in danger, right? Why don't you PC up? Sign this S and Y chrono, and we'll make this this 115 for the weapon disappear. He recognizes the ploy. If I sign the SNY chrono, I'm not a GP guy anymore, and the whole lawsuit goes out the window because it doesn't apply because he's not affected. So he's like, no, I'm cool, and he's not moved on. He's not blasted. He's programming on the yard with his people as he should be. My cellmate and I were taken to the hole. Right, like I said, a week later, 10 Southerners were released to the rec yard where over 80 Fresno Bulldogs were waiting. Southerners were attacked by the Bulldogs. Fortunately, there were roughly 80 white incarcerated people who intervened on behalf of the Southern Hispanics. Massive riot follows. 2 people are airlifted to the hospital. Then him and his cellie get out of ADSEG. There's more gladiator fights. And then the Associated Press publishes an article. So he kind of goes through the play-by-play, right? November 2019, the court ordered evidentiary hearing. CDCR put back in place the same bifurcated program that they had terminated months earlier at all institutions where Southerners and Bulldogs were housed in the same facility. Unfortunately, it's a catch. The program would end in March, and at that point, they would again have to integrate Bulldogs and Southerners. Bifurcated program only lasted a few days. Tower cop popped the wrong door. Shit cracked off. Bulldogs get placed on lockdown. After that, COVID hits and kind of changes the game, period, right? So he paroles. He goes to an evidentiary hearing. Like I said, it's a very interesting article, right? Gladiator fights between Bulldogs and Southerners are part of CDCR's larger systemic failure to protect incarcerated people from assault. Talks about Corcoran in the 90s, right? In 2018, CDCR began integrating general population inmates with SNY inmates. Those are people with safety concerns who should be in protective custody, such as those that were state witnesses, testified against the co-defendants, gang dropouts, people discovered to be informants for prison officers, law enforcement, people convicted of chomo charges. CDCR says that these inmates should learn to get along with each other and force the general population and sensitive need inmates together, call those non-designated program facilities, right? And so out of the 51 incidents of general population special needs integration, 64% resulted in violence. So that's his thing. And again, right, and like I said, I'll link to this in the description. But hopefully this helps dispel the narrative that one group is with all the activities and the other group is not. Okay? There are elements on both sides that don't want this integration. And there are people not in leadership on both sides that will pick up a knife and take one another's wind in a heartbeat. Don't get it twisted, right? Again, this legal work makes sense from a civilian perspective. But when I was locked up in the California Department of Corrections, if you told the CO or the administration, I can't go to this prison, I can't go to that yard, that is locking it up. That is PCing up. When you say I can't go there, or this guy can't move in my cell, or I'm not, if you look to the California Department of Corrections to help keep you safe, that's a PC move, straight up. It always has been. And a lot of people would suggest that it still is. I'm not saying everybody in prison and everybody in the general population side agrees with these moves. But here's what happens. That oversight, right, is done. The oversight from the Asker case, those attorneys, they're no longer paid by the federal courts to go keep an eye on what CDCR is doing. I think this case right here, this lawsuit, I think CDCR won on the merits, right? And whether they should have won or not is a different story. But I think there are people, and particularly some folks that have a hell of a lot of influence with the Southsiders, who don't want the integration. And they've tried everything. It is a fact that there are MM members that have told the administration, if you bring the Bulldogs over here, we're going to kill them. Right? How many bodies do we have to drop? That has happened. Okay. And I am sure that there are some Bulldogs who probably did say, oh, no, if these fools come over here, it's going to be on and cracking. Right? Which is essentially the same thing. Okay. Just like I am sure there are a ton of Southsiders and Northerners and Mexican nationals and Woods who are like, man, put me over there and let me do my thing. Just like there are a ton of bulldogs and new flowers that are like, man, put me over there and let me do my thing. It's a mix, right? Um, but this everything else has not worked. The lawsuits, the refusing to go to yard, which is basically what these dudes in Pleasant Valley did. They refused to go to the yard, right? 600 fucking appeals like that. Come on now, right? And so they've tried everything. And the administration is determined to mix these groups. And they were doing the whole SNYGP, okay. And now they are determined, and they have been determined for a long time, to mix the Bulldogs and the Northerns and the Southerners and the Whites, right? And somebody somewhere had the idea of, let's send a message. If this is what you're going to do, if you're going to insist, watch what I can do. And sent four of their homeboys in the visiting room to go take off on this new flower, who they probably thought was a bulldog, because they really don't know, right? That's why this happened. But here's the other side of things. Nobody is happy with what happened in the visiting room. That is not a respectable move. And I will tell you this, and I do not advocate for violence in prison. If I'm incarcerated, and if I don't see an apology on behalf of those who started this on Friday, right? And we know what an apology looks like in prison. If you've been there, if you've watched the videos about it even, you know. There's only one way to announce, yeah, bro, we fucked up. Or my homeboy messed up. Or, we did a little too much. There's only one way to do that, okay? And it's happened 70 some odd times in prison in the last couple of years. Folks know how to do it. If I don't see that, if I'm incarcerated and I don't see that, then I have no confidence that this is not going to happen again. If I'm in Salinas Valley and I'm going to that visiting room and I don't see an apology, a very noticeable apology, then okay, we got an issue. And if we're gonna take prison violence to the visiting room, if that's what you want to do, then okay, let's do that. But let's take it all the way up. It's level 4, 180 yard. I will go out there and hit you in front of your relative, right? But let's see how folks feel when your blood is squirting on your kids' clothes, right? And because that's what you want to do. That's where you want to take it. You want to send a message, and you want your message to impact every families, women and children and sons and kids and dads and moms. And you think it's okay to subject the visitors of people in prison to prison violence so that you can send a message. Okay, well, if we're going to do that, let's take it all the way. Let's take it all the way, right? And I don't want that to happen. Nobody wants that to happen. But then let's take the foot off the gas. And there's only one way to know you take your foot off the gas. You know what I mean? Like, and it's insane to me that this is where we're at. Right? Whether that happens, I'm not in prison. So thankfully, I don't actually have to do those things. But when I think about it, I'm like, how do I just tell my family don't come visit me anymore because these dudes might want to kick it off in the fucking visiting room again? Hey, my kid can't come see me because these guys might want to. No. Why give all the control to them to figure out, are you having a good day? Are you having a bad day? Are you sending torpedoes? Are you not sending torpedoes? No, I'll be a torpedo. Like, if we're going to take shots, let's just take shots. But let's not do this little Mickey Mouse stuff, right? Let's go for the gusto. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think if it ever happened, it would happen once, right? But something got to give. An error in decision making was made in that visiting room. I mean, prior to visiting on Friday. And anybody that's done time in the state of California knows that an error in decision making was made. Who made the error and what? That's outside my scope, right? But all this stuff is related. It's all connected, and I think it's clear, and it's public information, right? I'm not public information. I hope that there are no more incidents in the visiting room between general population folks. And I'm not saying I hope there's incidents with SNYs or EOPs or whatever, but I don't think those are different realms, right? Like that's kind of whatever we've seen. Dude took out his old lady during family visits, whatever. But I hope this stuff that started in the visiting room in Salinas is over, and that it stays over. Because that's not good for anybody. No matter your affiliation, no matter your race, no matter where you're from, no matter your status, that's just not good for anybody. And it's not going to make things better. And it is incredibly selfish to even put your people in a position to have to do that, right? To have to walk away from their families and take off on somebody, or have to walk up to somebody with their family and take off on them. Like how selfish do you have to be? You ain't the one doing it. The people involved were not the people who decide. Like, that's common sense. You feel that strong, you go get your money. At least put yourself front line, but we know that ain't gonna happen. Anyways, it's my video, man. It's been longer than I thought. I'll link to this in the description. You guys let me know what you think. And help share my videos. I'm trying to get back in the algorithm of things. It's been a while. So help others move in excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Help your community because they need you. And yeah, man, let's fix this shit. These guys doing too much. Take care.